Thanks so much for having me today. I was asked to come and join you guys to talk about the story of Eventbrite and how we've built our culture. And I think I know that I'm insanely passionate about this topic, but I guess I'll spend 2 seconds giving a little plug as to why I should be talking about this. So Eventbrite, we're actually located right next door, so it's a super easy commute. Eventbrite has been named one of the best places to work for the last 6 years in the Bay Area, and recently we broke into the national rankings as Fortune's top best places to work for millennials and for women. So super excited about that, but still learning a lot. And I'm actually not here to tell you about the rosy story of how we've come to build, a strong culture. I'm really here to tell you the real story. But I want to start out with a very serious question. How many of you have seen the episode or the show Silicon Valley? Cool. So up until recently, my husband and I were afraid to watch the show, my husband being my co-founder and the CEO of Eventbrite, because we felt that it might hit too close to home, and it sure did, because in the first episode, the protagonist walks through the break room, and what you see is this. And this is what the world thinks of Silicon Valley culture, and it's not that far off. We spent the whole first episode going, ooh, ow, God, kind of hits close to home. But for me, as a co-founder and somebody who is invested in the culture of our company and the 500 employees that work at our company, it made me wonder, is this what actually motivates the great talent that Silicon Valley has been known to attract? And when I started thinking about that, I also started to think about a book I love and hope some of you have read, which is called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. In the book, Simon talks about this concept of finding your why. And this was sort of made popular by a great TEDx talk he gave in 2009, so you guys don't even have to read the book. But in this book, he summarizes his findings in the golden circle. So he calls this the golden circle, and basically he says that most companies and teams are able to say what they do. Some companies and teams are able to say how they do what they do. It's a little bit trickier, but it's often seen as sort of the differentiating or motivating factor. But very few people are actually able to say why they do what they do. And Simon argues that to start with why is really to create influence for action rather than manipulate people to act. And he uses this concept in outlining why some companies and leaders have exceptional influence over groups of people, whether it be their employees or their customers. So when I thought about our why and I tried to figure out why Eventbrite exists, I mean, you guys know we're a ticketing platform. It's how you bought your ticket to gather here today. I also sort of thought about another cool dude who we like at Eventbrite. His name is Abraham Maslow. He's no longer with us, but he was a psychologist in the 1940s, and he wrote a paper called The Theory of Human Motivation. And in that paper, he outlines 5 basic human level needs that we need to survive and thrive. And it's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I'm not going to turn this into a university lecture, so I'm going to key in on the 3 that I find interesting. So the first base level is our own safety and our physiological needs. So food, water, air, shelter. Things that you would really notice if they were gone, like my next slide. The next one after that is the sense of belonging. And belonging is really important because it's why we gather at live experiences. So human connectedness and that feeling of being a part of something and being having that connection to other humans really motivates us to attend live events. So that's sort of our why at Eventbrite, is that whether it's through your own tribe, your family, or your team, or places like today, humans need this sense of belonging to thrive. Now, above that is sort of Maslow's end-all be-all, which is self-actualization. And the reason why I'm interested in this is it started to help me understand how teams are motivated. Because today, it's not just about coming to work and working 9 to 5. It's about realizing our goals. It's about building our personal legacies or experiencing the labor of love. And that is really where we start to see limitless possibilities. And that's where we start to get really motivated. Maslow wrote his paper in 1943, so obviously it's gone through many revisions, and I just wanted to throw out one that I think we could all agree on that needs to be added to the hierarchy of needs, which would look something like this. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I think it bears some truth, especially if I don't know if you guys are having Wi-Fi issues today, but that's common at large events. So let's bring it all back. So talked about Simon Sinek, talked about Abraham Maslow. I want to come back to this question of, so what is that thing that really motivates great talent? And for us, it started back in 2006, this sort of journey of Eventbrite and building the culture. We were founded, 3 of us co-founders founded the company. It was my then fiance, Kevin Hartz, and our third co-founder, Renaud Visage, who was our co-founding CTO. And it was just the 3 of us for the first 2 years. And what happened, because we bootstrapped the company, we had 0 resources, so we couldn't hire anyone else. We really ingrained our DNA into the early culture of Eventbrite without even realizing it. So this is something I tell early founders, which is that who you are is inevitably going to be reflected in your culture. And you kind of have to just accept it. So there's the good and the bad. I'll only tell you about the good from us. So the good was we always did the right thing, even if it was hard. We were extremely customer-centric, and we were very scrappy. We like to do things in sort of a lean, mean way. So after a few years, we actually gained traction with our product, and we started to acquire more and more customers. And with that, we acquired outside funding. So we raised our first round of funding from Sequoia Capital in 2009, and we decided to put almost all of that money into hiring. Because at this point, we knew who we were, we knew where we wanted to go, and we knew we needed a team to get us there. So we quickly grew to a team of 30. This is in one of our we've moved 7 times in San Francisco, so our office next door is definitely not our first office. So at this point, this was a very transformative time for Eventbrite because we were going from a validated idea and concept to a business, and we were going to be growing quickly from a team of 30 to what I considered a company of 100. And at that point, I realized that we had not only an opportunity to build a great product and a great business, but also a great company. And I had a hunch that the way we were going to build a great company is if we focused on the culture. And I quickly realized that it wasn't about the culture, it was actually about the people. You have to start with what motivates people. And so I was able to spend a large part of my time focused on this area of the business, which I find very fortunate because not all founders get to really dedicate themselves to their culture and their people. But this was my problem to solve. And over the next 4 years, we grew from 100 people to 500, and we quadrupled our office count in actually a span of 2 years from 2 offices to 8 offices worldwide. Now, you can imagine that there's been a fair amount of growing pains in those expansion years, and many tech companies go through this sort of hyper-growth period, and what I've noticed is that oftentimes sort of the wheels come off the bus through this period of hyper-growth. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I've discovered, but also some of the challenges that we've hit along the way and tell you sort of how we're trying to solve them. And I want to tie it back to the great work of Abraham Maslow, because as I started to think about what makes a great culture, I started to think about the hierarchy of needs. So I applied that to our culture. Now, especially in the tech industry and in San Francisco, your basic needs look a little bit different than maybe other industries. These are table stakes. So not only are they necessary for you to create a great workplace, but pretty much everyone has them, so they're not exactly your competitive differentiator. Above that, and very importantly, is this idea of community. And this is what I think actually sets Eventbrite apart. This is why I think we're being recognized on these best places to work lists. Because our sort of collection of micro communities at Eventbrite is what binds us together. It's sort of like this patchwork quilt. And people are gathering all the time at Eventbrite in these different types of affinity groups that they're finding themselves, whether it's to be crazy and go do Tough Mudder together, or to celebrate a new moment in their life, or to advocate for themselves and their peers. It's also professional. So we have a summer Brighternship program where interns come to Eventbrite. We also have an emerging leaders program that we've just built to develop young leaders at Eventbrite. And it's not about fitting in, it's also about honoring the individual. So in our community, we have every single person bring something to the table. And whether it's their difference of opinion or their best practices, we really celebrate the whole person at Eventbrite. And that starts to build this really strong community. I think if you went next door and walked into Eventbrite, you would notice something right off the bat. We all really like each other. So it feels very friendly and warm and, dare I say, bright at Eventbrite. But it hasn't been all rainbows and unicorns, because when you get a lot of people together and you're an emerging community with lots of micro communities and you're growing really fast, you're bound to run into a couple speed bumps. So I wanted to tell you about 3 that I hope are helpful for you in thinking about how you're growing your company or your team. First is my favorite, it's communication. As I mentioned, we quadrupled our office count in the span of 2 years. And to be completely honest and candid, we had no idea what we were doing. I thought if we just took our culture and put it in, South America, Nashville, Europe, or Australia, we'd be good, we'd be golden, because we had this great thing going here, and why wouldn't it just transfer? Well, turns out it doesn't necessarily just transfer. I think that what you have to do is definitely figure out what your core principles are. And I mentioned some of those early sort of DNA tenets, but for us, our core business principles are really rooted in transparency and learning and collaboration. So those are the things that aren't going to get compromised, and they're not going to change. But what I realized is that we had a lot of learning to do if we were going to create a fully inclusive global culture that really valued the perspectives of everyone in every office. So we've done things like added to our weekly founder Q&A, which we cheekily call Heart to Hartz. You can do that when you're married to your co-founder. We added a special international edition. So every Thursday at 8:30 a.m., we get on Google Hangout with every single office except for San Francisco and Australia because of the time difference, and we gather together in this way. And it's really interesting because you have this morning I got on and Argentina was planking. So they planking. I won't do it for you right now, but it's basically when you get down in a plank. And that's something that has been sweeping all the offices, is the 2-minute daily plank. They were planking, which was awesome. And then Nashville came on and they were like, oh, we haven't done our plank yet. So they got down and planked. And it was just bringing people together in that way has this really interesting effect on our global offices, because they're able to get a perspective of what the other global offices are doing, their thoughts and ideas, and also their challenges. Another thing that we do is just a global newsletter every week, which keeps everybody on point in terms of our weekly metrics and what's been going on in the company. And finally, what we really focus on is listening. So it's not just about having a San Francisco company radiating out all the information. It's about being able to create that high velocity feedback loop around the globe and really listen to each other to create a stronger company. Truth be told, I know it's surprising, but San Francisco is not the center of the universe, as it turns out. So what we've learned here is to not take information and communication for granted and to overshare knowledge. So sometimes Kevin and I feel like we're just a broken record. We're repeating information all the time. But what we see is that when we actually take the time to do that and we listen, everything runs much more smoothly. The second challenge is alignment. So Eventbrite started out as a ticketing platform. We were focused on empowering organizers to sell more tickets to any type of event, whether it be a yoga class or a music festival or an obstacle race. We wanted to create the largest self-service ticketing platform in the world. And we did that. We did a great job at speaking to organizers and helping them be successful. But what we realized is in opening that door, we opened another door a few years later when we realized we had tens of millions of consumers coming back to Eventbrite to find new live experiences because they were repeat purchasing on the platform. So the idea of creating a global marketplace for live experiences was something we all got really excited about. And this was a very sexy vision that we could all get fired up about. However, it doesn't really matter how compelling your vision is if you don't organize your team to be successful in achieving that vision. So after about 3 quarters, I realized that Eventbrite was split up into all these different silos. There were people that were just working on kind of Eventbrite 1.0, which was the organizer SaaS ticketing platform. There were people who were going after engaging consumers, and then there were other people trying to figure out how to build a well-lit marketplace. And we were all sort of running in different directions, and I mean, surprise, surprise, we weren't making that much traction. And so we decided to align ourselves, and in order to align ourselves, we did something that was very new for Eventbrite. You see, at Eventbrite, we don't like formal processes or anything that sounds too corporate-y. For the first time, we actually adopted something that was somewhat organized called OKRs. So objectives and key results are the reason why I'm showing John Doerr is that he's been an evangelist for the OKR goal framework. But objectives and key results are basically a way that everybody in the company can see how their work aligns to the strategic objectives of the company, which ultimately are tied to the grand vision. And what I like about OKRs, even though we're very early days in this, we're less than a year in implementing this, but what I like about OKRs is that they help the team really focus their work. So what we realized is that we were trying to do too many things, as many young companies do, and we weren't making enough traction in the place that we wanted to go. And then it also helps you measure through key results. So, it's a pretty easy way to understand if you're focused in the right direction. And also it helps you stretch. So it helps you make stretch goals and really push yourself. The third and final challenge I wanted to tell you guys about that we've gone through that I think is very common in young companies is around career development. And I want to tell you guys about this challenge through an anecdote and a story about a guy named Dylan. So Dylan has worked at Eventbrite for 5 years, and he joined the team as a young sales team member. He was a business development representative, which meant he spent his day cold calling people and then delivering warm leads to our sales account executives. He did a great job and eventually was handling some of our larger customers as an account manager. And when he was in this area of the business, he realized that Eventbrite, is a horizontal platform. So we're sort of a one-size-fits-all solution. And we're very broad. I told you about some of the categories that we have on the platform in way of organizers, but we're not very specific in any one category, and that can present a challenge for large customers. So he started to understand that we actually had this opportunity to open our API and create an ecosystem where developers could create plugins and integrations that could answer the needs of our larger customers when they had niche feature requests. So things like our Salesforce connector or WordPress or MailChimp or SurveyMonkey, these are all opportunities for us to, instead of building these features ourselves, being able to integrate with great partners and keep our core product experience very simple. And Dylan was at a crossroads at this point. He didn't know if he should continue building his sales leadership and be in a position that he wasn't that passionate about, or if he should raise his hand and say, hey, I've got a great idea and I think I should be the one to lead it, which is a big risk, or leave Eventbrite and find another opportunity. Thankfully, he chose door number 2 and raised his hand, and now Dylan is running Eventbrite Spectrum, which has over 2,000 developers, he is the catalyst of some of those great partnerships that I mentioned. So what I learned through this, and what I've learned through many Brightlings going through Dylan-esque type scenarios, is that career development these days is more like a lattice than a ladder. And for us, we want to make that abundantly clear. And we do that through keeping our conversations open and honest. So leaders are expected to be open when their people come to them, when their team members come to them and tell them maybe they aren't passionate about the role they're in. And obviously, each situation is different. It's quite nuanced. It's sort of table stakes that you have to be, kicking A to be considered for another opportunity. But what I found is that this is a great way to help people, especially early on in their career, figure out what they want to do and keep great talent motivated and at Eventbrite. So these are the 3 challenges that are sort of top of mind for me when I think about community. And again, I think this is really the strength of Eventbrite's culture. But this isn't what actually motivates great talent. It all comes back to that core concept that Simon talked about. It's the why. So we all like each other and we all have this common vision, but that's not enough. Every day we wake up and we dream about disrupting and democratizing an industry that has made its customers feel like this. The ticketing industry is really fraught with high customer fees, low innovation, and just a bad customer experience overall. So it's a great problem for us to solve. And so our why and what motivates the talent at Eventbrite is to bring the world together through live experiences. Because we actually believe that live experiences enrich our lives. They make us better people. They challenge us. They stretch us. And they're a way that we can find that sense of belonging, which we know is so important to all of us. And so today I want to end on the note of thank you for having me, as well as seek your why. Figure out what motivates you first and foremost, not just what you do or how you do it, but why you do it. And then maybe apply that to your team or your own company. And find that power of motivation, because at least that's what I've figured out so far, but hopefully you'll have me back next year to let you know the revised version of that. And I'm happy to answer any questions live or via Twitter. I guess my handle's up there. So I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and thank you so much for having me. Take care.